Good morning. Good morning and welcome to the 125th Landon Lecture on Public Affairs. The Landon Lectures were begun in 1966 by the late Governor Alf Landon and the late K-State President James McCain. The goal of the Landon Lectures is to bring the most prominent public figures to Kansas State University to discuss the pressing issues of the day. We are very pleased today to welcome Congressman J.C. Watts Jr. to the Landon podium to join 124 predecessors in bringing their thoughts and opinions on important public issues. Before introducing Congressman Watts, I'd like to introduce other members of the platform party. On my left, Dr. C. Sheldon, Professor of Sociology, Anthropology, and Social Work, and President of the KSU Faculty Senate. Next to her, Todd Coleman, a senior in marketing and international business, and our student body vice president. Hey, welcome. On my right, the chairman of the Landon Patrons, Edward Seaton, editor-in-chief and publisher of the Manhattan Mercury. Ed? Then next to him, Dr. Charles Reagan, associate to the president and chairman of the Landon Lecture Series. Well, I am very pleased and honored to introduce to you this morning Congressman J.C. Watts Jr. He was the first elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in November of 1994. In his most recent re-election in 2000, he won 65% of the vote. He has served as the conference chairman for the House Republican leadership since 1998. Congressman Watts serves on the Armed Services Committee, and he is a member on the Special Oversight Panel on Terrorism. In 1996, Congressman Watts gave an electrifying speech at the Republican National Convention. A year later, he was selected to give the Republican response to President Clinton's 1997 State of the Union address. He's also served as an honorary chairman of the 2000 Republican National Convention. And by the way, I want to make sure that you realize we have other illustrious guests here. We are very honored to have Congressman Jerry Moran of our 1st District. Jerry? Thank you very much. Thanks for coming. And we are also very, very pleased and honored to have another great congressman, Congressman Jim Ryan of the 2nd District. Jim, thank you very much. Representative Watts has not only been a leader in Congress, but also a leader in a Southern Baptist church, where he served as youth minister and later associate pastor. Congressman Watts honed his leadership abilities as quarterback of the University of Oklahoma Sooners, leading them to 2 consecutive Big 8 championships and Orange Bowl victories. He was voted the most valuable player in the 1980 and 1981 Orange Bowls. He later played professional football in the Canadian Football League and was voted the most valuable player of the Grey Cup. And that is, as you know, the Canadian Football League Super Bowl. You get a real sense of Mr. Watts' values when you read in his official biography, quote, "More important to Congressman Watts than any of his achievements is that he is a loving husband to his wife Frankie and a devoted father to their 5 children." Throughout his whole career at OU, with the Baptist Church and in Congress, he has remained steadfast in his commitment to helping the poor and to bring spiritual, moral, and economic renewal to communities all across America. And I think we all know, at least I think many of us do, that he is becoming an MVP of the GOP in the House of Representatives. Is that not right? JC, I have watched you long enough to know this, that you are a rising star in the world of American politics. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to introduce a very nifty person, a great congressman, Congressman J.C. Watts Jr. from the state of Oklahoma. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Mr. President, thank you very much. I am delighted and honored that President Wefeld and Kansas State University would think enough of me to extend an invitation for me to come this morning and to be a part of this lecture series. I actually called John several months back, and I said, John, I said, I've been reading about the Landon Lecture Series. I said, I've seen all these wonderful people, these people that I've read so much about, that's been so much a part of history. I've seen where they've spoken there. I'd love to come and speak. Would you let me come? And he'd say, J.C., boy, I'd like to, but I don't think you're ready. So I called him a couple of months later, and I said, John, I said, I'd love to come and give a speech at Kansas State University. I've got such a history with them from my days at Oklahoma University and football. I'd love to come and speak there. I said, would you let me do it? He said, J.C., I just don't think you're ready. So I called him again a month later, and I said, John, I want to come. I said, man, I've got so much to talk about, all that's going on in Washington, and I'm the conference chairman of the Republican majority, and man, I seconded the president's nomination, and for President Bush, I was GOP convention chairman of the convention, and I said, man, I've got so much policy stuff I love to talk about. Let me come. He said, J.C., I don't think you're ready. So I called him back about 3 weeks later, and I said, John, look, I said, I want to come and do that Landon Lecture Series so badly. I said, I'll do it free. He said, J.C., I think you're ready. I do thank the President for the invitation, and I also, it's good to be with my colleagues this morning, Jim Ryan and Jerry Moran, and I have been friends of theirs over the last several years. I've enjoyed my service with them. I've enjoyed my service with the entire Kansas delegation, actually, and Pat Roberts, your senator, and Sam Brownback, and Sam and Todd and I, we're all classmates elected at the same time, and Pat Roberts was a member of the House, and of course I think that you all are probably as much or as familiar with Pat Roberts and his wit as we all are in Washington, D.C., but I've enjoyed my relationship with them, and I'm delighted to be able to spend time with my colleagues on their home turf in their home state. The founder and of this lecture, Alf Landon, said once, and Alf was a presidential candidate, as you know, and was governor of this state, and he said once, he said, if there's one state that prepares a man for anything, it is Kansas. And while I was born and reared in the state of Oklahoma, the border state south of Kansas, I actually lived in Kansas for about 7 months. When I was in the first grade, lived in Wichita, went to elementary school at a school called Dunbar Elementary before integration, and so spent 7 months here, and I can say there was a time I used to visit this campus as a student athlete, and I was in a pretty hostile environment when I was in the stadium here, and it's delightful to be here on campus and not be running for my life. Speaking of football, I would be remiss not to thank Kansas State University and your current football coach, Coach Snyder, whose program I have come to admire, and I've watched this program grow and I've seen Coach Snyder get it turned around, and I would be remiss not to thank you guys for sending us 4 assistant coaches. That was the cornerstone of our national championship team in 2000. So I appreciate you sharing the wealth. I was talking to John. We were over in his office, and you know, I have never had any interest in being a university president until the last hour that I visited with Dr. Weevil. I mean, he's the quarterback of his own football team here at Kansas State, and he even arranges it that he can win every game. So this university president's thing is not too bad. It's looking better every day. But John, thank you again for allowing me to be here on campus today, and I'm looking forward to sharing. I asked John before he came in here, I said, okay, John, one final time, I said, now I'm sure I want to know what I'm to talk about. I said, what should I talk about? He said, well, talk about 25 minutes and sit down. So I'm going to honor that, and I know there will be some of you or many of you that will want to have questions, and so I'll try to get my remarks in and then fill some questions. Back in 1991, I was elected to a statewide office in the state of Oklahoma, Public Utility Commission. And under the Corporation Commission umbrella, we regulated public utilities and oil and gas. And after I had been sworn in I was an elected official, a public official in Oklahoma, for about 45 days, and I was asked by a good friend of mine, former Democrat governor in the state of Oklahoma, who at the time was the president of a university in Edmond, Oklahoma, called the University of Central Oklahoma. I was asked by Governor Nye, or President Nye, to come to a swearing-in ceremony that they were having. They had invited about 600 people to attend a swearing-in ceremony of approximately 16, 17 people who were going to be sworn in as new citizens of the United States of America. And Governor Nye wanted me to come and to give a 5-minute testimonial on what it meant for me to be an American citizen. And I stood before those 650 or so people and shared with them for about 5 minutes on what it meant for me to be an American citizen. And after I took my seat, I was sitting in a place that I could see the 16 or 17 people who were being sworn in. They were eventually called up, and they all stood there with their right hands raised, and they took the oath to become citizens of the greatest nation in all the world. And where I was sitting, I could see the faces of many of the people being sworn in, and I noticed that there were many different skin colors, many genders. There was man and woman, many skin colors, many different religions, many different backgrounds. But as they stood there with their right hands raised, they knew when they put their hands down, there would be one thing that every single one of them would have in common. They'd be citizens of the greatest nation in all the world. And where I was sitting, again, I could see the faces of some of the people, and it was a proud moment, and the big old tears I saw streaming down their cheeks because they had worked for 5, 6, 7 years going through the system. They had come from their homeland, and now it had finally happened. They were citizens of the United States. And I'll never forget the magic that I felt, the wonderful feeling that I felt. There was a magic in the air. And I remember saying to myself that day that I should renew, or that I renewed my commitment to say that each and every day that I would do all that I possibly could as an elected official, as a father, as a youth minister at the time, as an American citizen, to do all that I possibly could to sustain the greatness and the magic of being an American citizen. And friends, I believe there are things that we must do, that we have to do, that we can do to sustain the greatness of America. I don't believe that the greatness of America, that it will be sustained simply because we are Americans. I believe there's things that we must do. And I want to share several of those things with you this morning on what I think we must do to make sure that we never lose the magic of being American citizens. And I think the fact that we're in an educational facility today, we're on a campus of higher learning, I believe the first thing we must do is to make sure that every child in America, in spite of their skin color, in spite of what part of town they grew up in spite of the fact that they might have come from a single-parent home, in spite of the fact they might be red or yellow or brown or white, that we make sure that every child in America can go to a venue of learning every single day that is safe, and that venue of learning will teach them how to read and write and do the arithmetic, and today have the computer skills necessary to compete in a global marketplace. Friends, we talk a lot in politics about leveling the playing field, how important that is. Let me tell you something. You never level the playing field. We never level the playing field. If we have kids going to school in some parts of a community, the kids are more concerned about their lives than they are in learning. We can never have a level playing field if we have some kids never have a chance of having a level playing field, if we have some kids going to school every day in schools that don't work. Friends, everything that I have accomplished in my lifetime, everything that I hope to accomplish in my lifetime, it has been and will be centered on two things: my faith and my education. My father went to school. My father, who passed away about 1.5 years ago, at 77 years of age, spent 2 days in the 7th grade. That was the extent of his education. But he was one of the smartest men I'd ever been around in all of my life. Daddy understood what Frederick Douglass meant when Frederick Douglass said, some people know the importance of education because they have it. He said, I knew the importance of education because I didn't have it. So Buddy and Helen Watts taught that our kids will go to school. You will respect the teacher in the classroom. You will not only go to school, but you will act civilized when you get there, because you are there to learn how to read and write and do the arithmetic. Friends, I cannot put in words to you how important education is to every child in America. And we must make sure the kids in America go to venues of learning that is safe and that will give them the basics to compete for themselves and their family. Another thing I believe is important for us to focus on in order to sustain the greatness of America is national security, our military. As the President said, I serve on the Armed Services Committee, and I get to see the difficulties, the challenges that we face on a weekly basis in our military. And friends, the words that I'm about to say, the very simple words, some might see them as harsh, but I think they're very simple. I think they're very profound. But I adhere to the Roman theory. The Romans had a very simple theory. They said, if you want peace, prepare for war. Friends, if we expect America's sons and daughters, if I ever have to vote to call your sons or your daughters, if I ever have to vote to call you or your colleagues or your student associates, if I ever have to vote to call any American young man or young lady into harm's way anywhere in the world to protect our interests, to fight for our freedoms, friends, I believe I have a responsibility to give them the tools to win, not the tools to play a good game. We have seen and when I talk national security this morning, I'm not just talking about weaponry, making sure that our soldiers, that our airmen, that our sailors, that they're trained properly, that they have the proper equipment. I think there's many things that go into national security. Yes, we need to make sure that our men and women have the tools to win. But friends, military, there's more to national security, there's more to homeland security than our military. Let me give you something that we never think about in terms of national security. Energy policy. Now, what I'm about to say, people will say, as I've had them in Washington, I've had the talking heads, I've had the press, they've accused me of taking on a parochial interest. Well, I admit at the outset, I am from an energy-producing state. In the state of Oklahoma, we produce a lot of oil and we produce a lot of gas. But friends, I am much more concerned about our national security in terms of national security than I am the state of Oklahoma making profits. Post-September 11th, the greatest nation in all the world, we have purchased 250 million barrels of oil from Saddam Hussein. In 1991, we fought in the Persian Gulf War. In spite of what people will say, the Persian Gulf War was about oil. And I would submit to you, if it's okay for us to fight a war over oil, if it's okay for us to go to the Persian Gulf and fight a war over oil, why isn't it okay to explore for it right here at home? Look, I've got 25 minutes. Don't applaud. You take my time. $250 million barrels of oil from Saddam Hussein. Saudi Arabia, we don't know what's going on with this supposed ally of ours. You saw here 3 weeks ago where some of the nations involved as allies of ours in this fight against the Al-Qaeda network was threatening to cut off oil to the United States because they didn't like the way we were handling the situation in the Middle East. 58% of our daily consumption comes from foreign sources. Friends, that is a national security issue. We must be less dependent on foreign oil and more dependent on our homeland. And friends, we can drill, and I think we should be concerned about the environment. We must be concerned about the environment. I grew up we had pasture, we had farmland the whole time I was growing up in Eufaula, Oklahoma. Population about 2,000 people. I appreciate the environment. We should fight to protect the environment, but friends, we can drill for oil in an environmentally safe way with the technology available to us. We could go and take those 2,000 acres that we're proposing drilling on in Anwar. Of the 19 million acres, we take 2,000 and could replace every barrel of oil that we're purchasing from the very evil Saddam Hussein. Friends, we can do it in an environmentally conscious way. Technology is available to us that we can do things today that we only dreamed of doing 15, 20 years ago. So energy policy is a national security issue. Every time we have a flare-up in the Middle East, you see the price of oil go up at the pump. You know, anytime something happens concerning energy policy, we have to go to OPEC and say, hey, don't turn off the pipeline. Don't turn off the spigot. Keep it flowing. And then I would submit to you, if we're going to stay on foreign oil, why not expand in the areas that's more stable? I've spent a lot of time in West Africa, in Nigeria, and Ghana, and Equatorial Guinea. Friends, let me tell you something. Experts say that over in West Africa, there in Guinea, they believe there's enough reserves there, or there's more reserves there than in any other place in the world. Why not shift some of the resources to the continent of Africa? They would love to see us do that on the continent of Africa. So energy policy is national security. In order to sustain the greatness of America, I believe it's important that at this time in our nation's history, that we say to the people around the world, and I believe President Bush got it right, in this war against terrorism, friends, we must send the world. No other nation has been called on to lead the way America has. No other nation has talked to dictators who are now in democratically controlled governments about free markets and capitalism and economies and operating a military under civilian rule. No country has been called on the way the United States of America has. And again, I believe it's important in this time in history, as President Bush has said, to send the message loud and clear to those around the world: either you're for us or you are against us in this fight against terrorism. And I would remind the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia at the Crawford Ranch. Now, and I admit to you, I am talking as a Monday morning quarterback. I am not there on the Crawford Ranch with the president. I don't know what he's going to say. I don't know what's being said. I don't know how the meeting's going to turn out, but I guarantee you I take the opportunity to say to the Crown Prince, look, Prince Abdullah, we have protected you. We have defended you. We've got military bases in your country. My daughter, now this is me speaking, my daughter spent time on the military base in your country. Now you're sending some very confusing signals here about where you stand in the war against terrorism. Now I would remind you, Prince, that 15 of the 19 terrorists that attacked American citizens on September 11th, they were from Saudi Arabia. Osama bin Laden was from Saudi Arabia. You raised $90 million for the terrorist families in your telethon. Friends, I don't understand this. You claim to be our friend. I don't understand what you're doing. Prince Abdullah, I've got to say to you, if you expect me to commit American lives to defend you, you must send the signal loud and clear that you are a friend. You are not a foe. Friends, it is critical. This war against terrorism, we've got some difficulties. We've got some interesting things happening on foreign soil in the Middle East. Got some very interesting things happening. The fight against terrorism was going very well. Friends, I have enough confidence in American soldiers, and I don't ever want to be cavalier about it or take anything for granted. But American military forces, they will perform and perform well wherever you ask them to go. And they performed very well in Afghanistan and different parts of the world. We've seen them perform over the last 5 or 6 months over in Afghanistan, and again, perform very well. And now we've got the Middle East conflict. And I've been quite fascinated, Mr. President, that over the last 2 or 3 weeks, we've had people become critical, and many Republicans that's critical of the president in his handling of the Middle East situation. And I would ask you to consider some things. First of all, this war has been going on, the conflict in the Middle East has been going on for many, many years. I believe that America should and we will be a staunch supporter of Israel. I believe President Bush should and will be a staunch supporter of Israel. But you know what? Solving the Middle East conflict, it ain't going to be solved with me coming to Kansas State University and giving a 25-minute lecture. It isn't going to be solved with me standing at a national press conference telling the president what I think should happen. It isn't going to be solved by going on the floor of the House and issuing a 30-second sound bite that the news can use and put it in a caption on the evening news. Why? Because it's a very complicated, complex situation. Now, I've had some conservatives that's gone after President Bush over the last 2 weeks, and they don't like the way he's handled it. You've got some people on the left that they've gone after the president. They don't think he's handled the Middle East crisis the right way. They don't think Colin Powell, Secretary Powell, they don't think he's doing it. He did a very good job when he was over there. Think about this. If Arafat is as evil as we think that he is, and I think he is, we expect President Bush, we expected Secretary Powell to go over there and straighten it out in 2 days when the Israeli army was less than 20 yards away from Arafat when they invaded his compound. But they didn't lay a finger on him. But yet we think that President Bush, that Secretary Powell, should be able to solve it in 2 days. It is a very complicated situation to keep the coalition together and fighting the terrorist network and trying to tear down these terrorist cells in 60 different countries. It is a very complicated matter to keep the allies, to keep the coalition together, and at the same time, try to bring stability to the Middle East. And friends, I submit to you that I doubt very seriously there's a difference in conflict management and conflict resolution. You'll never have conflict resolution in the Middle East. I have lived, at 44 years of age, I have lived under 6 different presidents. And you know what? If President Bush spends 24/7 over the next 7 years, if he spends 24/7 over the next 7 years in the Middle East, I promise you, the next president will inherit it. Just as the last 6 presidents have inherited the situation from their predecessor. I have prayed in the last 2 weeks that God would give our president, his team. I've prayed when Secretary Powell was in the Middle East that God would give him wisdom beyond his years as we once again, as a nation, has been called on to intervene in a very, very hostile and complex situation. What else do I think is important in terms of securing the future of America? Strong economy, jobs, growth. Taxes are involved in that equation. We've had this national debate over the last Every year that I've been in Congress, we've had debates over taxes. And friends, I believe that if 68% of the economy is driven by consumer spending, why is it a bad thing to give people some of their money back to help buy their kids school clothes, to help them put food on the table for their families, to help buy that much-needed appliance that they needed for 2 years? We cannot sustain the greatness of America by asking America's working people, America's working families, to give the federal government, to give the local, state, and federal government 50 cents of every dollar they make in some government tax or government fee. And friends, I submit to you, the only way that we're going to spend the budget that we'll spend this year for 03 that we're putting together, we're going to spend $2.1 trillion. Roughly $2.1 trillion. Now, I tell you, the only way that I can get that $2.1 trillion, the only way my colleagues, that we can get that $2.1 trillion to spend, there's one of three ways we can get it. We can tax your personal income, we can tax your business income, or we can put a government fee on something that you use. Friends, I'm not trying to be cute here, but let me tell you something. There's no such thing as government money. It all comes from you. Either taxing your personal income, taxing your corporate income, or putting a government fee on something that you use. Now, there's a fourth way we can do it. We can vote to borrow it. But even if we vote to borrow it, you know how we pay it back? We tax your personal income, we tax your corporate income, or we put a government fee on something that you use. That's the only way we can do it. Now, I believe there's a role for taxes. Did I say Texas or taxes? I believe there's a role for taxes. We need taxes to pay to help kids get education, to continue their education. We need taxes and fees for our schools. We need taxes and fees for our roads, to have an infrastructure so my wife can drive my kids to school and she can go to the grocery store, or she can go to the cleaners. There's a role for taxes. Friends, I just think they're too high. And you know, and that has, you know, and everything that I've said to you today, some would say, well, he's supposed to think like that. He's a Republican. Friends, I thought like that in 1989 when I was a Democrat. My thinking didn't change once I became a Republican. You know where I got these thoughts from? From Buddy and Helen Watts on education. That's where I got them from. You'll go to school and you'll learn. You'll act civilized when you get there because you're there to learn. National defense is just common sense to say, don't ask our soldiers to fight our wars with one hand tied behind their back. The economy. Every time you see an employee, you must see an employer. Somebody has to risk their capital. I have been a small business person. I employed 5 people. I had to risk my capital. I had to go to the bank and get money and borrow money in order for me to create those 5 jobs. My thoughts on taxes has nothing to do with me being a Republican. I just think we ought to eliminate the marriage tax. I think it's unfair for 2 people to fall in love with each other, and they walk down the aisle, and if I'm the one that's marrying them, as soon as I say, you may kiss your bride, that's a $1,400 kiss, because your taxes goes up $1,400. I think it is unfair. If you own a McDonald's franchise, if you own a ranch or farm, if you own a McDonald's franchise, you think about this. You can own that franchise for 25 years. The federal government, they've never cooked one Big Mac, but when you die, they get 50% of your business. The federal government, they've never planted one single crop, but if you die, they get 50% of your farm. Friends, I think that's unfair. It is totally unfair. And friends, we get you from the time you get up, from the time you go to bed. You wake up in the morning, from the time your feet hit the ground, and you go in there and you turn that water on, we tax your utilities. You go and you sit down at your breakfast table, we tax your food. You get in your car, we tax your car. You stop at the gas station to get fuel, we tax your gas. You go in and you clock in at work, we tax your income. You go home in the evening and you sit down, you sit down in the lazy boy, the recliner, and you turn the TV on and you turn the ESPN or you turn the Fox Sports Net, and we tax your cable. And then you go to bed at night and you get down on your knees and before you get on your knees, you get on your knees, you pray to a living God that, man, you thank him for your day, you get off your knees, you kiss your bride, and you think that's free. We have a marriage tax. And then, if you decide, I'm sick of taxes, I'm going to die, you still can't get away from us. We have a death tax. So, it's too much. There's a role. But friends, I believe the families that I know, they have a whole lot more that they need to do with their money than their congressman needs to do with their money. There is such thing as being fair. Retirement security. Looking at new ways to deal with old problems. And last but not least, I do believe we need cultural renewal. The friends, it isn't politically correct in Washington, D.C. It's not politically correct in many parts of society today to talk about evil, to talk about wrong choices, to talk about personal responsibility. Friends, I've made bad choices in my life, and you know what? I promise you, before the good Lord calls me home, I'll make more bad choices. But you know what Buddy Watts taught me? Mitty Watts, my grandmother, you know what she taught me? She said, when you make a bad choice, you can't blame it on the president. You have personal responsibility means I have to be responsible for the good and the bad choices that I make. Doesn't mean you're better than anybody else. It doesn't mean that you're perfect. It just means you're going to be personally responsible for the choices that you make. Cultural renewal. Friends, we cannot sustain the greatness of America if we buy into an ideology that says that if it feels good, do it. If you don't want to do it, don't. If you don't like it, divorce it. If you can't handle it, drink it or drug it. We can't sustain the greatness of America. You know, we've used all the wrong models in trying to create productive human behavior and wealth. And before we go to questions, one of the worst models we have used in America over the last 40 years has been the model of welfare. There is a role, in my opinion, for welfare. I believe we have a moral obligation to take care of those that cannot take care of themselves. There is a role to have a safety net. But think about this. This is the model that the government created to help people. They said, if you utilize this model, we're going to penalize you if you save money. We're going to take your benefits. The federal government says to poor people, you can't save money. How do you get ahead in America? Two ways to do it. Either you save or you invest. The federal government doesn't say that to rich people, but they say to poor people, you can't save money. You can't own a home. You can't own a car. As a matter of fact, you can't own anything. The federal government says to poor moms, 1.5 says to poor moms, you can't marry the father of your children or we'll take your benefits. 1.5 million inmates in America, all the prison ministry that I've worked in, they say to us, We had no father influence, no male influence in the home and growing up, and yet the federal government says to these poor moms, we'll penalize you and take your benefits if you marry the father of your children. You know what? I think that's dumb. I think we ought to encourage dad to be in the home, not discourage dad from being in the home. Hallmark Cards here 10, 12 years ago did an event, had an event in prisons, 1.5 million inmates. They said, we'll give you a Mother's Day card with a stamped envelope. And you can send moms a Mother's Day card. 100% participation. Said we'll do the same thing for dads. We'll give you a stamped envelope, send your dad a Mother's Day card. A Father's Day card. 1% participation. Friends, I don't think the federal government ought to be involved in discouraging dads from being in the home. We should encourage that, not discourage it. Well, I could go on and on, but we are running out of time, and I agreed to take some questions. But friends, this place that you and I call home and the rest of the world calls America, it's a pretty fascinating place. And I'm delighted that in some small way, God has given me the opportunity to serve my state and serve my nation in the United States House of Representatives over the last 7 years. Thank you very much.
Hey, J.C., that was great.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me. Thank you, sir.
Thanks. Congressman Watts, thank you very, very much for your excellent presentation. In addition to having Congressman Ryan and Congressman Moran here today, and again, gentlemen, thanks so much for coming, we're very honored to have some of America's best fighting men and women from Fort Riley. Let's give them a big hand. Thanks, guys. Okay, Congressman, are you ready for some questions? And by the way, he was telling me he wanted to get a tie that had some of the Oklahoma red and the K-State purple. I'd say he's got a purple tie on, wouldn't you? Come on up. Okay, so for questions, as you know, to my right and to your left, let's start over here.
My name is Shane Hosier. I am a senior in business management. I'm also a Navy veteran. Congressman, with the current lack of naval surface fire support that the Marine Corps has, there has been talk about bringing back 2 of the Iowa-class battleships, namely the USS Iowa and the USS Wisconsin. Now, I've done research on this topic. I found that these to be capable platforms in this current war on terrorism. I would like to know what your view is on this topic and if this is going to be brought up in the Armed Services Committee.
I think basically your question is bringing these 2 military ships back into service?
Yes, sir.
First of all, I can't tell you why they're out of service, but I can tell you that over the last 8 years, we have seen our military decline in ways that I don't have time to talk about this morning. We have seen our number of ships go from about 600 down to about 300, and there's one answer, there's one thing that could contribute in bringing about resolution to those things, and it's dollars. You know, we just have not put the proper dollars. We have had to fight for every dime that we've gotten in the previous administration. We fought for every dime that we got over and above the budget that they submitted, trying to just keep us at par. And so even with President Bush's budget of about $379 billion, you take over the last, in the previous administration, we ate our seed corn for research and development, for procurement, for weapon systems. and even in the president's budget, it is way above what we've seen in the previous administration. But even at $379 billion, you take out the personnel cost, you take out the short-term contingencies over in Afghanistan, we still do very little in terms of research and development, procurement, readiness. So we've got a whole lot of catching up to do in terms of military and preparing us, I think, for what we could see in the 21st century. And friends, I can tell you, one thing I can guarantee you, we will have to fight wars. I don't know when, I don't know where, but we will have to fight wars. And you mark my word, there's somebody out there in this world that many people hate our guts. There's somebody out there that someday they will challenge us. They will have enough courage to challenge us in ways that we hadn't seen before, using weapons that we here in the United States have never been. And I think September 11th was a shot across the bow that should raise the conscience level of every American concerning the importance of our military. Thank you, sir.
Over here to the left, then.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much for coming to our campus and talking on energy and becoming energy independent. This is something I follow very closely. So as far as the Middle East, cutting off our energy supplies, what I understand, because these Middle East oil-producing countries are so small-minded, and that they refuse to divest their economies, and their economies are solely based on oil, selling oil in only the United States, that, or predominantly the United States, that one, they might threaten to cut off our oil, but I don't see them ever doing that. As far as becoming energy independent, from what I understand, reading the most generous estimates of how much fossil fuels are left in the United States, that even if the United States completely, fully exploited energy reserves that are here right now, they will still have to import about 50% of our energy. And so it seems to me that if the United States is truly serious about becoming energy independent, they're going to have to look at making machines more fuel efficient, and also looking at alternative ways of, alternative fuel sources. Except for the Republicans, they shut down the raising of the fuel efficiency.
No, and I don't want to interrupt you, but you're asking me 9 or 10 different questions,
No,
so I'm trying to get your questions so I can answer all of them.
So my question, I guess, coming to it, because I don't think, yeah. So the question is, if the Republicans are serious about becoming energy independent, why aren't they looking more into fuel efficiency and finding alternative fuel sources?
Let me answer those many questions and that broad statement and I think there's 3 things that will encompass everything that you just shared. I agree with you. I don't think we will ever become independent of foreign oil, but I believe we should become less dependent on foreign oil. You said that these economies, these energy economies on foreign soil, they are dependent on their oil and gas revenue. They would never cut that off. How many of us would have thought in 1991 that Saddam Hussein would go and kill his own people, and then in Kuwait just start burning those reserves to make sure that nobody else could use them? So I don't think we can look at it in terms of what we think they will not do. As long as we are thinking or guessing what they will not do, I believe that's a national security problem. I think we should put ourselves in a position that we don't have to guess with them. We can be dependent on ourselves. And thirdly, the energy policy, I agree with you that in terms of the energy policy and the energy bill that we sent to the United States Senate, we had some conservation measures in there. We had alternative fuel sources. We offered tax credits for alternative fuel sources. And I tell you, I would love, being from a state that produces a lot of natural gas, I think natural gas is a great alternative fuel source. Very clean burning, very safe for the environment. We've got an abundance of it. So I agree with the argument on alternative fuel sources. So we have addressed that, or we tried to address that in the energy bill. Everything, as you have heard concerning the debate on energy policy, has been focused on ANWR. 2,000 acres of a 19 million acre reserve. And which, by the way, those pristine pictures that you see on TV of ANWR and the caribou, that 2,000 acres is so far from those caribou. And by the way, those caribou, they love those pipelines. It's heat for them. They mate by them. They're saying, yes, let them come over here and explore. We like it. But sir, you make some very good points, and what I'm saying is we tried to take a comprehensive approach in the energy policy to say, look, it's not just about exploration. It has to be about conservation and alternative fuel sources. Trying to preserve our energy. My dad, when I was a kid growing up, and I know I see some gray hairs in here, you all can relate to this. You come home, my dad used to come home and he'd say, this house looks like a Christmas tree. Turn off some of these lights. Never in my wildest dreams did I think I'd be a member of Congress and look back to those times that Daddy was trying to conserve energy. Now, he was trying to take care of the household budget, but that was also good for our energy policy when we conserve energy like that. Man, if you're not in a room, turn off the light. If you're not using a restroom here on campus, turn off the light. All that stuff makes us less dependent on Saddam Hussein. So, yes, sir.
Congressman Watts, glad you're here. I'm visiting on the campus along with a few others the last couple of days. One of your friends might be here, former Congressman Dick Nichols from McPherson. I just met him yesterday. I come from Dr. Weefall's country up in Minnesota, so I know those guys up there.
Congressman Nichols.
But anyway,
do you remember him? Yeah, okay.
Congressman Nichols,
Okay.
I'm very impressed with the gentleman. I just met him yesterday. Just wondered if maybe he's here, and maybe you might recall who, Mr. Nichols. Thank
Is
you.
Congressman Nichols here? Oh, okay. Well, let's give him a hand. Okay, there he is right there.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for coming. There seems to be, you're talking about cultural renewal. How do we overcome the cultural differences in the Middle East, which seems to be the undercurrent that's forcing the situation that we have, as opposed to just militarily? How do we overcome that their children are taught in high schools, even in Saudi Arabia, to hate Christians and Jews, as well as it speaks of that in their Quran, even though that's based on historical past, such as the Crusades and so forth? How do you overcome those cultural differences to where that people can actually sit down and talk frankly, as opposed to trying to appease individuals like Yasser Arafat, like Europe tried to do before World War II with giving them Austria?
When I speak of a cultural renewal, I can't speak to the culture of another nation. I can only speak for the culture of who we are here in America. And here in the United States of America, in spite of what your faith might be, I believe in spite of what your faith might be, in spite of what your gender might be, in spite of what your skin color might be, I believe that I can respect you. I believe there has to be a common set of principles of respect and of decency. I don't believe that it helps in terms of our culture. When I remember in my community growing up, I had a breakfast this morning, and there was a gentleman, I think his name was, I forget what his name was, but anyway, he was a white gentleman, and he was telling me, I was talking about cultural renewal, and he was telling me about the Motown sound. I love that old Motown sound. I had the Temptations at the convention last year come and do a concert for us at the National Convention. You know, you look at that old music, you never heard lyrics about raping women and killing cops and the things that you hear. You know, there was a decency about that. In my little black poor neighborhood on the east side of the railroad tracks in Eufaula, Oklahoma, our music used to be our pride and joy. Today it's our shame. As we talk about killing cops and raping women and all the horrible things that we say about the women that we date or that we love, or, you know, I just think, you know, there used to be, you know, there used to be respect for the stop sign, for the stoplight, in spite of the fact that we lived in a segregated society. When we got to the stoplight, we understood that green meant go, yellow meant clear the intersection, red meant stop. Today, the stoplight means nothing. Nobody has the common principles, the common values of decency and respect and respecting adults and appreciating adults. And so I can't address what happens, the culture of people on foreign soil, but I do believe if you become a citizen of the United States of America, that in spite of the fact that you might disagree with someone else's faith, you do still have a responsibility, in my opinion, to respect them and recognize them as my faith teaches me, God's creation.
Absolutely, that's what I was trying to say, is how do we get people from the Middle East not to look at us as MTV lunatics? You know, if I was in the Middle East and was watching what I saw on TV, I'd be convinced I was right if I was a Middle Eastern person. And what I'm talking about culturally is how do we go past that point to where we can sit down with them and not have them think that we are the evil nation that they call us, as opposed to just doing it militarily, even though militarily is definitely needed sometimes.
Well, MTV, in spite of what one might think of MTV, and I don't watch MTV, but I think MTV is the one thing that separates us from other countries. We are a nation of laws. We are a nation that recognizes free speech. MTV is a form of free speech, and I believe as a parent that, you know, some nations, those same nations that would look at MTV and call us American lunatics, they're the same nation that says that their women, they don't treat their women the way I think a lady should be treated. You know, they are very elitist in many respects. They can't criticize their government. You know, one of the wonderful things about being a member of the House of Representatives in the United States of America, I might not like what people say about me, but by golly, I'll defend their right to say it about me. And those same countries, you know, that would look at us through the prism of MTV, for every person that, you know, that I would ask them to tune in on Sunday mornings. You know, use that as a barometer for us, but unfortunately they never will.
We'll take two more questions, one here and one there, and then we'll have to wrap it up.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name's Ashley, and I'm a 6th grader from the elementary school, and I wanted to know how do you feel about the funding of education in our schools?
Ashley, did your teacher ask you to ask me that? Ashley, I think it is important, and let me in the name of disclosure. You're asking me the time here, but bear with me as I build your clock. I am a product of public education, Ashley. And I don't believe that America can ever abandon public education. But I believe America owes it to you, and we owe it to my kids who are in public education, 2 of my 3 kids who are still at home. 2 of them are public education. My oldest daughter is in a private Christian school. I think we owe it to the education system to make every school accountable, to make sure they are performing, making sure they are getting the results, and I think we have to give them the tools to do that. I think it is important. I am a parental choice advocate. I am one that would say that I believe parents should have the choice of where to send their kids to school. I am not a parental choice advocate because I want private schools to replace public schools. I just believe there should be competition. Why do I believe in competition? Because these $5 reading glasses, the best $5 investment I've ever made in my life. And if there's only one place for me to buy these reading glasses, I doubt very seriously I wouldn't get them at $5. But the fact that I can go to Target, or I can go to Eckerd's, or I can go to Walgreens and get reading glasses, Walmart had to be conscious of what they were charging me. Competition creates, I think, the best in us, not the worst in us. It forces us, it challenges us to give our most, not our least. And I believe that all schools should be willing to compete to make sure they're putting out the best possible service and teaching our children how to read and write and do the arithmetic and having the computer skills.
How do you recommend boosting both those programs but lowering or redefining the roles of taxes that you mentioned were too high?
Well, the military that I'm supportive of, I've also supported reforms in our military. Regardless of wherever waste is, regardless of where abuse is, regardless of where waste is, I don't think you salute it if it's in the DOD no more than you would salute it if it's at the Department of Education. But let me say this concerning taxes. None of it has any money. None of it has any money if we don't have jobs, if we don't have people to pay taxes. See, my theory is you don't need more taxes, you need more taxpayers. And how do you create more taxpayers? You create an environment. Capital is a coward. Capital will go to friendly environments, to friendly markets, if it's at home or if it's abroad. Capital will go to friendly venues, friendly environments. As I said, 68% of the economy is driven by consumer spending. Social Security, you want to make Social Security sound, Social Security in about 2040 is going to be bankrupt. So if, 2002, next 38 years, you better hurry up and get 65 so you can start getting your Social Security because in the next 40 years, it's going to be bankrupt. One of the ways to help make Social Security whole, create more taxpayers. One of the ways to fund our military, create more taxpayers. One of the ways to fund more education, create more taxpayers. You want to fund those community service programs, create more taxpayers. We don't do it by creating more taxes. When you reduce the tax burden on the American people, and again, this is just an economic principle that works. It worked with John Kennedy. It worked with John Kennedy, Democrat. It worked with Ronald Reagan, Republican. It's now working with George Bush, Republican. When you reduce taxes and you give people more seed corn to invest or to save or to buy appliances or to buy food, that creates revenue. That creates jobs. When you buy an appliance, you help the banker, those people that work at the bank that finance it. You help the transportation company that hauls it. You help the manufacturing firm that builds it. So there's a lot that happens in the economic realm in creating jobs. I don't think you can look at it and say, well, we have to have taxes high in order to pay for all of these things. You know, the facts just don't support that. And as Daniel Patrick Moynihan, Democrat senator from New York, says, he says in Washington, he said, you're entitled to your own opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts. And so the facts just don't support a higher tax base. let's reduce those taxes, give people the seed corn to have more to spend and to save and to invest or to do the things that they need to do with their families. And when you do that, it does help a whole lot of people when you take that, use that economic framework. Thank you very much.
Well, you're the best, man.
Thank you, sir.
You're the best.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.